The ivory envelope rested on my kitchen counter, its gold lettering catching the morning sunlight like it had something to prove. Annual Whitaker Family Christmas Dinner. 1437 Cedar Hollow Lane, Northern Vermont. Some addresses live in your memory like old wounds. You don't forget them. You just learn how to breathe when you hear them again. I traced the edge of the envelope with my thumb. 4 years, 4 Christmases I had skipped. 4 years of silence, distance, and building a life none of them had bothered to ask about. The last time I walked through those doors, I had been the poor niece, the one they seated near the kitchen, the one who had potential but never quite enough to matter. But that version of me no longer existed. Now I was Hailey Jennings, 38 years old, founder and CEO of Northbridge Ventures, a firm built from sleepless nights, rejected pitches, and a kind of hunger no inheritance can buy. And by 2 p.m. tomorrow, Christmas Day, I would legally become the majority owner of Whitaker Biotech, the same company my uncle once laughed and said I wasn't qualified to intern at. Miss Jennings, Olivia's voice came gently through my office door in Boston's Seaport District. Legal just sent the final acquisition packet. Come in. She entered with her usual calm efficiency, navy folder in hand. The harbor shimmered behind her through the glass wall, gray and endless. It closes exactly at 2 p.m. tomorrow, she said. Board notification is automated. Media embargo lifts 5 minutes after. I opened the folder. Pages of contracts, regulatory filings, layered holding companies, months of quiet strategy hidden behind ordinary business headlines. My signature would be the last piece. I signed. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Clear my schedule tomorrow, I said. Olivia raised an eyebrow. For the Whitaker dinner. I closed the folder. Yes, it's time I attended as myself. The next afternoon, I dressed with intention. A charcoal wool coat, understated boots, no designer logos screaming for attention. Let them see what they expected to see. My most modest car rolled up the long circular drive at exactly 1:58 p.m. Snow lined the hedges. Golden light spilled from the mansion windows. The Whitaker estate looked like a holiday card for generational wealth. Aunt Meredith hurried out, perfume arriving before she did. Hailey, we weren't sure you'd come, she said, lips pursed into sympathy that never reached her eyes. Times must still be challenging. I manage, I replied, smiling politely. Inside smelled like cinnamon, pine, and quiet competition. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter floated through rooms decorated not for comfort, but for impression. Look who's here, Travis called from the fireplace, wine already in hand. Still working on that tiny startup, Hailey, or did you finally get a real job? I'm doing fine, I said evenly. He smirked, satisfied with his annual performance. Uncle Richard approached, scotch in hand. Didn't expect to see you. Free meals are hard to turn down, I suppose. I took my old seat at the table. Same chair, same corner, same view of the kitchen door swinging open and shut while servers moved like background props. They talked about ski properties in Aspen, a new yacht partnership, tax strategies over Bordeaux. Then Travis puffed up proudly. Dad's company is about to double in size. Major acquisition about to close. I checked my watch. 1:59 p.m. I folded my napkin slowly. The doorbell rang. I'll get it, Meredith said, rising. I've got it, I said gently, standing before she could argue. Every eye followed me across the marble floor. I opened the door. Olivia stood there, composed, professional, tablet in hand. It's done, she said quietly. I stepped aside so she could enter. She walked into the dining room, posture straight, voice clear. Good afternoon. As of 2 p.m., Northbridge Ventures has finalized its acquisition of Whitaker Biotech. Effective immediately, Hailey Jennings is the majority owner and acting chair. Silence didn't fall. It shattered. Travis laughed first. Okay, seriously, what kind of joke? I turned, holding up my phone. Financial news alerts flashed across the screen. SEC confirmation, live press release, time-stamped filings. Uncle Richard's glass slipped from his hand and exploded against the hardwood floor. "That's not possible," he whispered. "It is," I said calmly. "You just never saw it coming." Phones began buzzing around the table. Notification after notification. Emergency board emails, investor alerts. Travis stared at his screen, face draining of color. Hailey Jennings, Northbridge Ventures, full acquisition. He looked up at me like he didn't recognize the person standing there. "That's my company," he croaked. "No," I said softly. "It was." The air in the dining room felt thin, like the walls themselves were struggling to process what had just happened. Uncle Richard gripped the back of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. "This is some kind of manipulation," he said, voice shaking. "A hostile stunt. It won't hold." "It already has," I replied. I walked back to the table and gently moved a crystal glass aside, making space. Then I placed a slim leather folder in the center, right between the untouched turkey and the silver gravy boat. "Inside are the official transfer documents, board approvals, and SEC confirmations," I said. "You'll also find the shareholder vote breakdown, 82% in favor." Travis stared at me. "You turned them against us." "I convinced them the company deserved better leadership," I corrected. Jessica pushed her chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. "This is a family business." "No," I said evenly. "It's a publicly traded corporation. You just treated it like a family privilege." Olivia stepped forward and turned her tablet so Richard could see. "Sir, the emergency board meeting has already concluded. The transition clause in your contract has been activated." Richard looked at the screen, then at me. "You planned this for Christmas." "I planned this for the moment you'd be too comfortable to see clearly," I said. Meredith sank into her chair. "How long?" she whispered. "How long have you been doing all this?" 6 years, I answered. "Since the day Uncle Richard told me I wasn't qualified to fetch coffee at Whitaker Biotech." His jaw tightened. "You were a kid with a theory and no experience." "I was a graduate with a scalable model you didn't understand," I said calmly. "So I built it without you." I remained standing, but my voice never rose. Be clear about what happens next," I continued. "No one here is being dragged out today. I don't believe in humiliation as management strategy." Travis let out a breath that almost sounded like relief. "But," I added, "leadership changes are effective immediately at the operational level." I turned to him. "Your authority over sales teams is suspended pending performance review. Access to financial systems will be restricted by end of day." His mouth fell open. "You can't just strip my role in front of everyone." "I can," I said, "but I'm doing it privately on paper. This conversation is simply courtesy." Jessica crossed her arms. "And what about my department?" "You'll receive a restructuring proposal," Olivia answered smoothly. "Your division has underperformed for 3 consecutive years." Jessica looked like she'd been slapped. Uncle Richard finally found his voice again. "You think shareholders will trust you? You're an outsider." I met his gaze. "I'm the largest shareholder in the room. That makes me exactly what they trust." He faltered. "You ran Whitaker Biotech like it was untouchable," I continued. "But markets don't respect legacy. They respect results." The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the silence. "I'm not here to destroy the company," I said. "I'm here to make sure it survives the next 20 years. That requires decisions you were too sentimental or too arrogant to make." Meredith shook her head slowly. "You're talking like we're strangers." I looked at her, really looked. "You made me a stranger the day my mom's hospital bills piled up and not one of you called," I said quietly. "You sent flowers to the funeral. That was the last help I got." Her eyes filled, but I didn't stop. "Do you know where I slept my first year building Northbridge?" I asked. No one answered. "My car," I said, "in a hospital parking garage with free overnight security. I showered at a 24-hour gym. I pitched investors in the mornings and pretended everything was fine. Travis swallowed hard. Why didn't you say anything? I gave a small, tired smile. Because you already thought I was a failure. I didn't feel like auditioning for pity, too. Olivia's tablet chimed softly. Media requests are increasing, she said. Financial networks want live comment. Tell them I'll release a statement in the morning, I said. Tonight is personal. I looked around the table one more time. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. If I wanted revenge, none of you would have severance packages waiting in your inboxes right now. Richard frowned. Severance. Yes, I said. Generous ones, provided you cooperate with the transition and honor the non-disparagement agreements. Travis blinked. And if we do? Then the performance audits become public record, I said evenly, including expense misallocations, failed compliance reviews, and the supplier contracts signed with your college roommate's firm. His face drained of color. That's blackmail, Jessica whispered. No, I said, that's governance. I finally picked up my coat from the back of my chair. You all taught me something very valuable, I said. Never depend on kindness where power is involved, so I built power first. I paused, hand resting on the chair that had once felt like a punishment seat. You could have had me as an ally, I said softly. Instead, you made me competition. No one tried to stop me as I walked toward the door. Behind me, the table full of people who once made me feel small now sat in stunned silence, staring at contracts, emails, and a future none of them controlled anymore. And for the first time in that house, I didn't feel like the girl near the kitchen. I felt like the owner of the building. The cold Vermont air hit differently when I stepped outside. It didn't sting, it cleared. Behind me, through the tall glowing windows, I could see silhouettes still frozen around the dining table. A family that had always been so loud now reduced to stunned outlines against chandelier light. Olivia followed a few steps behind. Car's ready, she said quietly. I paused at the top of the stone steps and looked back at the house one last time. Not one of them ran after you, Olivia noted. They don't know how to talk without leverage, I replied, and tonight they have none. The drive away from Cedar Hollow Lane was silent except for the soft hum of the engine over snow-dusted roads. Halfway down the mountain, my phone began lighting up. Board members, analysts, investors, reporters. Olivia glanced at the screen. Your uncle's lawyer just emailed. Subject line, emergency injunction. I smiled faintly. Open it. She scanned quickly. They're threatening to challenge the acquisition based on undue influence and coercive timing. I leaned back against the seat. Translation, they're panicking. Legal response. Already drafted, I said. Schedule send for 8 a.m. include the shareholder vote record and the fairness opinion from Deloitte. Judges don't like feelings. They like documentation. Olivia nodded, typing. By the time we landed in Boston later that night, the story had exploded across financial media. Hostile holiday takeover. Young CEO, OUSDS legacy leadership. WHIEKR biotech enters new era. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. Hailey, Uncle Richard's voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. This doesn't have to be war. It isn't, I said calmly. It's business you just finally lost. You'll tear the company apart with these changes. No, I said. I'll rebuild the parts you neglected. A pause. What do you want? He asked quietly. I looked out over the Boston skyline as our car pulled into the underground garage of my building. I want Whitaker Biotech to become what it could have been if ego hadn't been in charge, I said. And I want you to sign the transition agreement without making this uglier than it needs to be. You're enjoying this, he muttered. No, I said honestly. I'm finishing something. I hung up. The next morning, the legal counterattack came right on schedule. Whitaker's old guard filed for an emergency injunction in federal court. claiming the acquisition was predatory and executed under holiday duress. Our legal team was ready. By noon, we had filed a 47-page opposition. Every signature timestamped, every shareholder vote verified, every disclosure logged weeks in advance. At 3:12 p.m., the judge denied their motion. Insufficient grounds, transaction lawful, leadership authority valid. Olivia walked into my office with the printed ruling. "They lost," she said. "They were always going to," I replied. "They just needed it in writing." The real shift happened over the next 2 weeks. Executives, who had once ignored my emails, now requested meetings. Senior researchers thanked me for approving long-delayed funding. One department head confessed, "We had a breakthrough ready last year, but budget was redirected to executive bonuses." "Not anymore," I said. Performance replaced politics. Transparency replaced favoritism. Stock prices climbed. Investors called it bold leadership. Employees called it relief. On New Year's Eve, final signatures came in. Richard accepted his retirement package. Travis signed his exit agreement after his legal review confirmed he had no leverage left. Jessica took a reduced role in a subsidiary after declining outside offers that suddenly seemed less generous. Every NDA executed. Every transition locked. Clean, legal, final. Late that night, alone in my penthouse, I poured a glass of sparkling water and stood by the window overlooking the city. 6 years ago, I had slept in a car with a winter coat as my blanket and ambition as my only heater. Tonight, I own the company that once wouldn't let me past reception. Not because I yelled. Not because I begged. But because I built something too strong to ignore. Power, I had learned, is quiet while it's growing. And undeniable when it arrives. By January, the headlines had shifted. Not about the takeover. About the turnaround. Whitaker biotech stock, SURGES 18% under new leadership. NORTHBRIDG strategy REVIVES, stalled research pipeline. Former EXECUTIVES, quietly exit after transition deal. Results silence arguments faster than pride ever could. My days blurred into back-to-back strategy sessions, lab visits, investor briefings, and long evenings reviewing proposals the previous leadership had ignored. One afternoon, I walked through Whitaker's primary research facility for the first time as owner. Not as the niece who was qualified, as the person signing the checks. Scientists who had once watched Travis Breeze pass their funding requests now stood straighter, hopeful, energized. Dr. Ahmed, head of a small oncology team, shook my hand. "We submitted this trial proposal 3 times last year," he said. "It never made it past executive review." I flipped through the summary. Promising early-stage results, strong data, minimal funding needed. "Approved," I said, handing it back. He blinked, just like that. "Just like that," I replied. "Good science shouldn't need a family name attached." Word spread quickly. Morale rose, productivity followed. And with every measurable win, the narrative shifted further away from hostile takeover and toward strategic rescue. But power always has one last test. In February, an anonymous complaint hit the regulatory board, alleging insider coordination before the acquisition. It was subtle, technical, designed to trigger an investigation. Olivia placed the notice on my desk. Timing suggests it came from someone inside the old circle. "Of course it did," I said. "Desperation writes anonymously." We responded within hours. Full communication logs, trading blackout compliance, third-party audit trails, every call, every meeting, every transaction documented. 3 weeks later, the board closed the inquiry. No violations found. The final attempt to discredit me had failed, not because I fought louder, but because I had prepared better. Spring arrived in Boston with sharp blue skis and the kind of sunlight that makes glass towers look like they're made of possibility. One evening, I received a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a legal notice. A letter. From Meredith. Inside was a short note. I didn't know how small we made you feel. I see it now. I hope one day you'll let me know the woman you became, not just the one we underestimated. No excuses, no manipulation, just acknowledgement. I didn't reply right away. Forgiveness, I had learned, doesn't have to be immediate to be real. At the next annual shareholder meeting, I stood on stage in front of hundreds of investors, employees, and board members. Charts behind me showed growth, expansion, breakthroughs, and development. But I didn't start with numbers. I wasn't supposed to be here, I said. The room quieted. I didn't inherit this seat. I earned it when no one was watching, and this company's future will be built the same way, on merit, not legacy. Applause rolled through the hall. Not polite. Earned. Later that night, alone again in my penthouse, city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass, I thought about the girl who once sat at the edge of a long dining table, trying to be invisible enough to survive the evening. She thought power looked like loud confidence and expensive watches. She was wrong. Power was patience, strategy, restraint, records kept, contracts reviewed, timing mastered. Power was knowing you could destroy, and choosing instead to rebuild better. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Whitaker Biotech reaches all-time market high. I smiled, not because they finally saw my worth, but because I had stopped needing them to. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly doubted, stay with this journey. Like, subscribe, and share, because the next victory might be yours, and your moment could be closer than you think. Success didn't make life quieter. It made the stakes higher. By early summer, Whitaker Biotech was no longer in recovery. It was leading. 2 stalled drug trials were back on track. A partnership with a European research consortium was finalized. Employee retention had climbed to record levels. But with growth came visibility. And visibility attracts resistance. One morning, Olivia walked into my office with a look I hadn't seen in months. "Proxy battle," she said, placing a report on my desk. "A minority shareholder group is trying to rally votes to restore legacy leadership values." I scanned the document. The language was polished, but the fingerprints were obvious. Former allies of my uncle, old board connections, people who had benefited from the way things used to run. "They're not trying to win," I said. "They're trying to slow us down." "Do we fight publicly?" Olivia asked. I shook my head. "No, we outmaneuver privately." Within a week, I met with the top institutional investors personally. Pension funds, healthcare trusts, long-term stakeholders who cared more about stability than sentiment. I didn't attack my family. I showed performance metrics. Revenue growth, research milestones, operational efficiency, regulatory compliance. Hard numbers beat emotional nostalgia every time. When the shareholder vote came, the proxy challenge collapsed before it ever reached the floor. Quiet, decisive, final. A month later, I returned to Vermont. Not to the Whitaker estate. To the small community hospital where my mother had spent her final days. The building looked smaller than I remembered, older, underfunded. I met with the hospital board in a modest conference room with scuffed floors and a flickering light panel. "I'd like to fund a new wing," I said. "Cancer research and patient support services. No nomming rights for me." The director looked stunned. Then, who would it be named after? I smiled gently. Lillian Jennings. She believed kindness should be loud, even when people are. Construction began that fall. No press release tied my name to it. Just a quiet donation rooted through Northbridge's foundation arm. Power didn't need a spotlight anymore. That winter, an envelope arrived at my office. Hand-delivered. Inside was a formal letter from Uncle Richard. Not a demand, not a complaint. A resignation from all remaining advisory roles, effective immediately. At the bottom, in handwriting instead of typed text, were 5 words. You were stronger than I knew. I read it twice, then filed it away. Not as a trophy. As closure. On the anniversary of the acquisition, I stood once again in Whitaker Biotech's headquarters lobby. But this time, it looked different. Interactive research displays lined the walls. Young scientists moved through the halls with energy instead of anxiety. A digital board displayed live progress on active trials. Olivia joined me near the entrance. Hard to believe this all started with a Christmas dinner, she said. I watched a group of interns walk past, laughing, full of ideas no one had crushed yet. No, I said softly. It started long before that. It started with being underestimated, with being dismissed, with learning to build in silence. And it continued, because I never confused revenge with victory. Victory was this, creating something better than what tried to exclude me. I turned toward the elevator. Ready for the board meeting? Olivia asked. I nodded. Let's go run the company. They said I'd never belong in. Spring turned into summer, and for the first time in my adult life, nothing was on fire. No emergency legal filings. No crisis calls from investors. No family members trying to claw back control they had already lost. Whitaker Biotech was stable, growing, respected. And I was no longer running on survival. I was leading on purpose. One quiet Tuesday morning, I received a message from HR. There's a young applicant who asked to deliver a letter to you personally, Olivia said over the intercom. Said you're the reason she applied. Send her in. A nervous woman in her early 20s stepped into my office, clutching a folder like it contained her future. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. I read about your story. I'm the first in my family to finish college. Everyone told me biotech was too ambitious. But you proved people like us can build things too. People like us. I remembered those words, how heavy they once felt. What's your field? I asked. Biomedical data modeling, she said quickly. I built a predictive system for early tumor detection. It's small, but... Show me, I said. Her eyes widened. Now. Now. She opened her laptop with shaking hands. An hour later, I walked her personally to the research director. Fast-track her evaluation, I said, and make sure she has the resources she needs. When I returned to my office, I realized something had shifted again. Success had stopped being about proving I belonged in rooms that once rejected me. Now it was about opening doors before someone else had to break them down the hard way. That evening, I drove alone. No driver, no schedule. Just the road stretching ahead under a gold-streaked sky. I didn't head toward the old estate. I didn't need to. That chapter had closed the moment I stopped seeking validation from people who only understood value when it wore a price tag. I pulled over near a quiet overlook just outside the city. The skyline glowed in the distance, glass, steel, and the reflection of a life rebuilt from nothing but determination and discipline. I thought about every insult that once kept me awake, every rejection, every dinner where I shrank myself so others could feel tall. None of it controlled me anymore. Not because I erased the past, but because I outgrew it. I had won legally, strategically, completely. But the real domination wasn't taking their company. It was becoming someone they could never make feel small again. I got back in the car and drove home, calm in a way that doesn't come from victory, but from closure. If this journey stayed with you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel like you didn't belong, remember this. Build anyway. Grow anyway. Win quietly if you must, but win completely. Like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs the reminder that patience, strategy, and self-belief can change everything. Your moment isn't late. It's loading.